And Pompeo represents the same thing, just a more Christian version with less hair. So we're facing a serious crisis. And the crisis manifests itself in terms of the worsening of relations. As Putin said recently, relations between the United States are getting worse and worse. He said they are going downhill. They're getting worse and worse. We just look at what's been happening most recently. In 2018, Vostok 18, the Russians, the Chinese conducted the biggest Russian war games since the end of the Cold War. The United States, with all of its NATO allies and a couple others, conducted the biggest war games in Norway that the West has ever conducted since then. We've sent up our US-India command now, where we're doing military exercises with India, trying after all these years to get India on our side geopolitically. The obvious provocation with Iran that we can go into. Recently, the director of the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, just the last few days, said the risks of use of nuclear weapons are higher now than at any time since World War II, and that seems to be true. We've got the crises with NATO in the Baltics and in Eastern Europe. We just sent 4,500 more NATO troops. Now Trump is sending additional troops to Iran, to the Middle East, to combat Iran. We're sending our Air Force carrier strike groups into that region. But it's not working in many ways. We did have a near collision between US and Russian warships in the Sea of the Philippines last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. They missed each other by between 50 and 100 feet. Similarly, we run our freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, and US and Chinese warships missed each other by the same distance recently. We're very, very near these very highly provocative situations. The New York Times just reported about American hacking into Russia's energy grid, energy networks, deep into their energy networks, the ability to shut them down. Oliver showed that in his movie Putin that we have this ability to shut down Japan's grid. We could do this anywhere around the world, and Putin is threatening cyber warfare. You know, they've got the same capability. When it comes to cyber, the United States might have the lead, as Obama said, but everybody else has got similar capabilities, and we've seen there are very few defensive capabilities. But is this working? Clearly the world is lining up against the United States. The Gallup poll last year said that in January 2017, 48% of the nations around the world, the population around the world, thought the US represented a good role model. The US leadership was respected. That dropped in 1 year down to 30%. Germany now passed the United States. China passed the United States. Russia was 3 points behind in terms of the global image of the United States. We know that Russia and China just concluded an oil deal in which they're not going to use the dollar. We know that the Europeans are trying to find ways around the dollar because of the sanctions Trump has imposed around Iran. The US position is weakening. And the Russian position, there was a mind-blowing article last week, less than a week ago, maybe 4 days ago, in the New York Times by Sarah Topol. I don't know if any of you saw it. It's called "What Does Putin Want?" And she spoke to, this is the New York Times, I'm pretty sure it's the New York Times, and she spoke to all of these Russia experts, especially Russians, and she said none of them thought that Russia is out for conquests. They want to recreate the Russian Empire. They said that they just want to be respected as powers, and they're using the situations to their advantage wherever possible. And she talked about the Middle East, how Putin is the one who's now the arbiter in the Middle East. That Netanyahu, who we despise, has been to Moscow 10 times in the last 3 years. That Russia is seen as the arbiter, not the United States anymore, not Jared Kushner. That Russia now has arms deals and relations with Saudi Arabia, with the United Arab Emirates. Is that the article? It's fascinating because, but it just blows the whole narrative. I mean, I was shocked to read it. and I'm not that easily shocked. So the Trump strategy and the US strategy under Obama is backfiring, because we're not in a unipolar era, and it's not a unipolar moment. It's a multipolar world, and China, in 2050, we know that next year, maybe as early as next year, India will outstrip China in terms of the biggest country in the world population-wise. The projections are by 2050, China will have the biggest economy in the world, India will have the second biggest economy, the United States will be third, and Russia will be sixth. So I mean, the world is changing. And the United States has two options. We could destroy the world. If we have enough nuclear weapons, of course, destroy the world. Nuclear winter does not require very many. The leading scientists' report says that a limited nuclear war between India and Pakistan, which when 100 nuclear weapons were used, when 100 Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons are used, will create partial nuclear winter and lead to up to 2 billion deaths. Right now, there are 7,000 nuclear weapons in the world, and they're not Hiroshima-sized. They're between 7 and 80 times as powerful as the Hiroshima bomb. If even a tiny fraction of them were used, there would be no future. The sun's rays will be stopped by the smog and the dust in the atmosphere. Temperature of the Earth's surface would plunge below freezing. Agriculture would be destroyed. Billions of people, maybe everybody on the planet, would be killed. But there's still, despite that fact, we're veering more and more toward confrontation. And that's the danger. What we don't have right now is anybody who speaks for mankind. What we don't have is anybody who speaks for the planet. What we have are people who want to make America great again, make Russia great again, make China great again, make India great again, a bunch of nationalists, two of whom have the ability to end life on the planet instantaneously, and the rest to do almost as much damage. So that's the dilemma we're facing, and we've got to somehow figure out how we're going to stop this. I didn't even mention climate change. I will mention very briefly because it's so essential, but the thing that we have to know about climate change was that the scientists said if the temperature rises more to 2 degrees centigrade, that we're in very, very serious problems. Now, most scientists think that the best case scenario is going to be 3 degrees centigrade before the end of the century. Some of them are predicting 4 degrees, some are fearing 5 degrees centigrade increase. That the estimate now is if the current rate of emissions continues, it's more than 3 degrees centigrade. And again, do we have anybody speaking for the planet on this? You got this clown in Washington saying that climate change, global warming, is a Chinese hoax. You know, enforcing these trade wars with China and this confrontation with Russia, rather than working together to solve the nuclear crisis, the climate crisis, crises that we face as a civilization, as a species, as a planet, you've got people who are making the situation worse. So we've got a lot to think about and figure out what we're going to do. Thank you.